Welcome to Should Have Known It, where we present 15-minute shows of things you definitely should know. Hi, welcome to Shoulda Known It. I'm Mr. Whitfield, and today's topic is the prisoner's dilemma. Here's the scenario. Two suspects, call them Al and Bruno, are arrested and placed in separate interrogation rooms. They cannot communicate. Each is offered the same deal: testify against your partner or stay silent. That's it. That's the whole setup. And yet, from this simple structure, something deeply counterintuitive emerges. If both stay silent, the police have weak evidence, and both go free after 1 year on a lesser charge. If one betrays and the other stays silent, the betrayer walks free immediately while the silent one gets 10 years. And if both betray each other, both testify, they each serve 5 years. Write that down somewhere. We are coming back to those numbers. So here's the question each prisoner faces alone in that room. What should I do? Not what is morally right. Not what my friend would want. Purely, coldly, what is the rational move? And this is where mathematics does something genuinely disturbing. Suppose Al thinks Bruno will stay silent. Then Al can either stay silent 1 year or betray. Walk free. Betraying is better. Now suppose Al thinks Bruno will betray. Then Al can either stay silent 10 years or betray 5 years. Betraying is still better. No matter what Bruno does, Al is better off betraying. Mathematicians call this a dominant strategy. Bruno faces exactly the same calculation. His dominant strategy is also to betray. So both rational agents, each doing the individually correct thing, land on the outcome where both betray 5 years each. But if they had both stayed silent, they'd each serve only 1 year. Two people acting rationally in their own self-interest produced a worse result for both of them than cooperation would have. This outcome, where everyone plays their dominant strategy and everyone ends up worse than they could have been, is called a Nash equilibrium. After John Nash of Princeton, whose 1950 dissertation formalized the concept, both defecting is stable. Neither player can improve their outcome by changing strategy alone. It is an equilibrium not because it is good, but because neither person has an incentive to leave it unilaterally. That distinction matters enormously. The tragedy of the prisoner's dilemma is not that people are selfish. The tragedy is that even fully cooperative intentions, reasoned through individually without communication, collapse into the worst mutual outcome. Selfishness isn't even required. Pure individual rationality is sufficient to produce collective catastrophe. Let me formalize this so it sticks. Game theorists represent these situations as payoff matrices, a grid showing what each player receives under every combination of choices. For the prisoner's dilemma, the key structural feature is that the payoffs satisfy a precise inequality. Label the outcomes. T for temptation, what you get for betraying a cooperator. R for reward, what you both get for mutual cooperation. P for punishment, what you both get for mutual betrayal. S for sucker, what you get when you cooperate and are betrayed. The dilemma exists precisely when T is greater than R, which is greater than P, which is greater than S. Temptation beats reward. Punishment beats being the sucker. In our original scenario, T equals 0 years, R equals 1 year, P equals 5 years, S equals 10 years. Inverting because years in prison are bad. The ordering holds. Any situation with payoffs satisfying that inequality is a prisoner's dilemma, regardless of what the actual numbers are. That structural inequality is why game theorists call this a dilemma and not merely a trap. A trap has only one wrong move. The dilemma has no right move, only a best response to someone else's best response, spiraling into mutual harm. Now, here's where the classroom walls dissolve. Consider two countries, neither of which wants war, deciding whether to build nuclear weapons. If neither builds, both are safe and prosperous. If both build, both are poorer and still equally threatened. But if one builds and the other doesn't, the builder gains decisive military leverage. The dominant strategy for each nation, reasoning alone, is to build, both are worse off. This is not metaphor, this is the literal logic that produced 70,000 nuclear warheads by 1986. Cold War arms race is a prisoner's dilemma run in real time. Over 40 years, between two superpowers who understood game theory perfectly well. The Rand Corporation was advising the United States government, and Soviet scientists were reaching the same conclusions independently. Knowing the structure of the game did not help them escape it. That is the truly unsettling implication. Awareness of a prisoner's dilemma is not sufficient to solve it. Climate negotiations follow the same logic, with 6 billion players. Every country benefits from a stable atmosphere. Every country also benefits slightly more if it keeps industrializing while others cut emissions. The dominant strategy for each nation reasoning about its own economy is to defect, to negotiate cooperation while quietly continuing to emit. You are watching a prisoner's dilemma unfold in real time, in every climate summit, every year. And your last group project, the one where everyone agreed to contribute, and then 2 people did all the work while 3 people did very little. Congratulations! You experienced a multiplayer prisoner's dilemma. Each person reasoned that their individual contribution wouldn't swing the outcome, so the marginal cost of slacking was low. Multiply that logic by everyone in the group, and the Nash equilibrium is mutual under-contribution. Same structure, much lower stakes. Here is one that keeps epidemiologists awake at night. Antibiotics work as a collective resource. Their effectiveness depends on bacteria not yet having evolved resistance. When a doctor prescribes antibiotics for a viral infection they cannot possibly treat, or when a farmer gives them prophylactically to healthy livestock to speed growth, each individual actor gains a small private benefit. The antibiotic works this time, or the animal grows slightly faster. The cost, accelerated resistance, is distributed across the entire human population and deferred into the future. The World Health Organization estimates that by 2050, antimicrobial resistance could kill 10 million people per year, more than cancer kills today. That number is the accumulated cost of millions of individually rational prisoners' dilemma defections. Each single prescription, each single prophylactic dose, was the correct move for the individual patient or farmer in that moment. The collective outcome is a potential civilizational crisis. This is what it looks like when a prisoner's dilemma scales. Now here's the beautiful part. Everything I have told you about the prisoner's dilemma assumes the game is played exactly once. A single interrogation, a permanent choice. But what happens when the same 2 players meet repeatedly, knowing they will face each other again tomorrow and next week and next year? The mathematics changes completely. In the iterated prisoner's dilemma, cooperation can emerge without any authority enforcing it, without any communication, without any altruism. It emerges from pure self-interest over time. The reason is that repeated interaction transforms the payoff calculation. Defecting today doesn't just win you a short-term gain, it also provokes a response next round, and the round after that. The shadow of the future falls across the present choice. In 1980, Robert Axelrod at the University of Michigan ran a tournament. He invited scholars in game theory, economics, psychology, and political science to submit computer programs and coding strategies for the iterated prisoner's dilemma. 14 strategies entered the first tournament. They played each other in round robin for 200 rounds each. Then Axelrod scored them and published the results. The winner was the simplest program submitted, 4 lines of code sent in by the psychologist Anatol Rappaport. Rappaport's strategy is called tit for tat. It has 2 rules. Rule 1, cooperate on the first move. Rule 2, on every subsequent move, do exactly what your opponent did last time. If they cooperated, cooperate. If they defected, defect. That's everything. No memory beyond 1 round. No complex inference about the opponent's psychology. 4 lines of code. Tit for tat won the first tournament. Then Axelrod published the results and ran a second tournament. 62 strategies entered, all aware of tit for tat's victory, many explicitly designed to defeat it. Tit for tat won again. Axelrod then ran a third tournament, this time evolutionary, where successful strategies reproduced at higher rates over generations and unsuccessful ones died out. Tit for tat did not just win. It drove the entire population toward cooperation. Why does it work? Axelrod identified 4 properties that made it nearly unbeatable. It is nice. It never defects first. It is retaliatory. It immediately punishes defection. It is forgiving. It returns to cooperation as soon as the opponent does. And it is clear. Its behavior is simple enough that opponents quickly learn what to expect. Nice, retaliatory, forgiving, and clear. These 4 words are, in some sense, the mathematical definition of successful cooperation. Axelrod's deeper finding was about when tit for tat fails. It requires that the future matter enough to both players. Formally, the probability of meeting again, what Axelrod called the shadow of the future, must be sufficiently large. If either player believes this is the last time they'll interact, defection becomes rational again. The horizon matters. Cooperation collapses near the end of the game. This explains a phenomenon known as the endgame problem in negotiations, contracts, and even friendships. Companies that are about to go bankrupt suddenly stop honoring warranties. Contractors who have just finished their last job in a city do shoddy work. lame duck politicians stop cooperating across party lines. It is not that these actors become selfish suddenly, it is that the shadow of the future has shortened to nothing, and defection is rationally correct again. It also explains why long-term relationships, commercial, diplomatic, personal, tend to produce better outcomes than one-off transactions. The length of the shadow is not just a philosophical metaphor. It is a calculable quantity. Economist Robert Aumann won the Nobel Prize in 2005 partly for formalizing exactly how long the shadow needs to be, and under what conditions for cooperation to be sustainable. The answer involves a discount rate, how much you value tomorrow compared to today, and the probability of repeated interaction. Now, tit for tat is not a perfect strategy. In a world with noise where a cooperating move is occasionally misread as a defection due to miscommunication or error, tit for tat can spiral into mutual punishment cycles from which it never recovers. You defect by accident, I retaliate, you retaliate back. And we're locked in mutual defection forever, even though neither of us wanted to be there. This is why later research identified more robust strategies. Generous tit for tat, which occasionally cooperates even after being defected against, performs better in noisy environments. And a strategy called win, stay, lose, shift, which repeats whatever you did last round if it worked and changes if it didn't, actually outperforms tit for tat in evolutionary simulations with noise. The evolutionary arms race over strategies is itself a kind of iterated game with no final solution. There's something melancholy in that. We spend decades developing the optimal cooperative strategy, only to discover that the definition of optimal shifts depending on who else is in the room. Cooperation is not a solved problem, it is a moving target, which is perhaps why it remains so difficult in practice, even when everyone in the room has read Axelrod. So how do real societies escape single-shot prisoners' dilemmas, where there is no repeated interaction to invoke? The historical answer is external enforcement, courts, contracts, treaties, regulatory agencies. When two parties cannot trust each other's future behavior, a third party, the state, an arbiter, an international body, imposes penalties that change the payoff matrix. Defection is no longer the dominant strategy once defecting carries a legal consequence that exceeds the temptation payoff. This is the institutional rationale for government that most political philosophers have independently discovered. Hobbes called the state of nature, no enforcement, pure individual rationality, a war of all against all. He was almost certainly without knowing it, describing the Nash equilibrium of an n-player prisoner's dilemma. The social contract is a mechanism to replace that equilibrium with a cooperative one, enforced by the Leviathan. Political philosophy and game theory arrived at the same conclusion from different directions. The other escape route is communication, which is why the original dilemma prohibits it. When players can talk before deciding, they can make credible commitments, align expectations, and coordinate on the cooperative equilibrium. This is why diplomacy, negotiation, and even small talk among strangers are not merely social pleasantries. They are the mechanism by which the payoff matrix gets renegotiated before the game is played. I want to pause here and look at something uncomfortable. The prisoner's dilemma is sometimes used to argue that cooperation is fragile and self-interest is inevitable, that markets, competition, and defection are simply human nature expressed mathematically. This is a misreading. What the dilemma actually shows is that cooperation and defection are both stable outcomes, depending on the structure of the interaction. We build institutions, legal systems, international law, social norms, precisely to engineer the conditions under which cooperation is the Nash equilibrium, not defection. When those institutions weaken, when courts are captured, when treaties are abandoned, when norms erode, the game reverts. We are not more selfish when institutions fail. We are playing a different game, one whose equilibrium happens to be mutual defection. The policy implication is not despair. It is that the structure of the interaction is what we should engineer, not the character of the players. Though I will admit, every time I read a news story about a climate summit collapsing or an arms agreement dissolving, I do find myself thinking, we know the math. We know exactly what is happening and why. We know the strategies that produce cooperation. We have the theoretical tools, and we still reliably land on the Nash equilibrium. Sometimes knowing the trap is not sufficient to escape it. And yet, and I want to end here because this is the part that matters, cooperation does emerge. It emerged in the trenches of World War I when German and British soldiers spontaneously developed live-and-let-leave arrangements with their enemies across the wire, trading informal ceasefires in an iterated game neither side had designed. It emerges in fisheries managed by local communities without government intervention, documented by Nobel economist Elinor Ostrom. It emerges in the immune system, in symbiotic biology, in the evolution of altruism among kin. Axelrod's deep result, the one that makes game theorists genuinely optimistic, is that cooperation does not require saints. It does not require altruism or trust or shared values or even communication. It requires only the shadow of the future, players meeting repeatedly, and a sufficiently forgiving response to defection. Given those conditions, the mathematics says cooperation is not idealistic. It is inevitable. That is one of the most beautiful results in all of social science. Every time you honor an agreement you could have broken. Every time you contribute to a group project when you could have free ridden. Every time you return the shopping cart when no one is watching, you are, empirically, not being naive. You are playing the strategy that wins the iterated game. The mathematics is on your side. The prisoner's dilemma. 2 people, 1 room each, no communication, and the seed of everything from arms races to your last group project. The good news is that the math doesn't end in despair, it ends in tit for tat. Nice, retaliatory, forgiving, and clear. See you next time?
And that brings us to the end. Thank you for joining me. I hope you learned something new. Until next time.